So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual general meeting. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. This is actually a sound test for the streaming this evening. So, yes, we are streaming, and Ian will make reference to that a bit later. We're just about to start, so if you can make your way to find a seat. And again, apologies, we're just checking the sound to make sure that it's audible for our streaming on our YouTube Athletics TV accounts.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Ian Jones. I'm the President of Athletics Victoria, and I'll be chairing this annual general meeting this evening. First of all, it's my pleasure to welcome you all here. Thank you all for coming, and we rely on your continued enthusiasm. That's a given. So welcome to all of those in the room, but also welcome to those who are joining us on Athletics TV. We usually start these annual meetings with an acknowledgement of the life members who are present with us this evening. So I'm just going to run through those and I'll ask each of them to stand as I call. First one, Max Binnington, Margaret Dunbar, Rhonda Jenkins, Richard Lauritz, Tamsin Lewis, Manu. Hi, Tamsin. Anne Lord, William McLennan, Brian Moore, Lorraine Morgan, Laurie Preston, Helen Renitz, Ian Rickard, Arthur Witchell, and Tony Williams. Okay, a special welcome to those life members. Also, we have apologies from Ivan Harding, who's a life member, from Ellen Perry, Trevor Vincent, and Margaret Marnie, who have indicated they are sorry that they were unable to be with us this evening. I also want to acknowledge, while we're on the subject of life members, the loss several weeks ago of Ron Clark. Now, I can't possibly add to what has been said about Ron, but he's a giant of our sport, and I will just ask that we just spend a few moments just reflecting on the enormous contribution that he made to athletics and also beyond athletics in our country. So if we could just observe a few moments of silence and reflection out of respect for Ron. Thank you. I now want to introduce the other board members, my fellow board members from Athletics Victoria, starting with Vice President Russell Clowes, if you'd stand, Russell. And then our other Vice President, Heather Ridley, and our Treasurer, Eric Sigmont, and Rowan Claffey, and Rod Griffin, and Amber McDougall, and Jamie Strudley. They've been a terrific board to work with, and I thank them for their contributions. I also make a special welcome this evening to the CEO of Athletics Australia, Phil Jones. Phil's the other person on the couch here. Yeah, it's a rather low couch, isn't it? And Phil, I'm pleased to say, will be addressing us later in the meeting. But thank you, Phil, for coming along this evening. We have a list of apologies besides those life members that I've already mentioned. We have apologies from Ken Little of Albury Athletics, Mary and Jeff McDonald from Athletics Chilwell, Scott Bowden from Athletics Waverley, Fiona Dangerfield from Bendigo Harriers, Ian Blancheret from Deakin, Darcy Long from Old Scotch. We also have an apology from David Grace, who's the President of Athletics Australia, and also Matt Mahon from the Board of Athletics Australia. Matt has been a fairly regular attender at our annual general meetings, and Matt is finishing up this year. He's completed 10 years of service on the Board of Athletics Australia, and this will be his last year. And I did want to, if he had been here, I did want to acknowledge the contribution that he has made, not only nationally but also in the Oceania region. He's made a great contribution to athletics. Are there any other apologies that people are carrying? If not, we'll move to item 3 of the agenda, which is the election of office bearers. And I'm very grateful that George Primus has volunteered once again to be the returning officer for this election. George has helped us on many occasions, and we're very glad of his assistance and advice. So there are 3 positions that have been vacated on the board of Athletics Victoria. We have 4 nominations, which is good, and so we're going to have the election. The information about the candidates has been provided, and therefore I think we're in a position to proceed with the election. So, George, I think for those who have not previously voted, who have ballot papers, George has the ballot box here, and George will move around, and if you could make sure that your voting slip gets put into the box, that would be great. So we'll just have a pause for a few minutes while that takes place. Oh. It's just been pointed out that I should have introduced the candidates for the election. My apologies for that. Let's start by, well, I've already introduced Rowan. He's a sitting board member. Just stand up again, Rowan. And Rod Griffin. Okay. Now, Peter Jones, the third candidate on the list, he's not able to be here this evening because of a work commitment in Alice Springs. So unfortunately I cannot introduce him. But then we also have Bruce Smith. Is Bruce here? Good. Thanks, Bruce. Okay, well, we'll just pause for a few moments while George collects all the votes. Please make sure that if you have a voting slip that George gets it. Thank you for that. Sorry about that. Any more voting slips? Last call for voting slips. Okay, thank you all. George will take away the ballot box and count the votes, and the election will be declared. The election will be declared towards the end of the meeting. Thanks, George. We move to item 4, which is the minutes of the previous AGM. The previous AGM was held on the 29th of July 2014. Can that be possible? The 29th of July is a Wednesday both years? Anyway, 23rd, okay. Anyway, the minutes have been circulated. Does anybody have any problem with the accuracy of the minutes? Any amendments required regarding accuracy? If not, I'll call for... Oh, okay. Thank you. If not, I'll call for somebody to move that the minutes represent an accurate record of last year's annual general meeting. Thank you, Lynn. And a seconder. Thanks, Ian. Ian Rickard. Good, thank you. I'll put the motion then that the minutes represent an accurate record. All those in favour and against, that's carried. Moving back to An apology when I was reading out life members. It should have been Ivan Harding, not Ian Harding. My apologies for that. Okay, item 5, business arising from the minutes. And this is a very pleasurable task. We have 2 presentations to make to life members. These life memberships were awarded at last year's annual general meeting, and the first one will be to Tamsin Manu. So we'll ask Tamsin to come forward, and while Tamsin's coming forward, I'll begin reading the long list of contributions and achievements. Tamsin has had an exemplary career both on and off the athletics track. The positions she's held and service provided include current member of the Sandringham Athletics Club, former member of the Doncaster Athletics Club, former member of Athletics Essendon, life member of Sandringham, ambassador working with Sandringham, promoting junior involvement in our sport, along with coaching, mentoring and assisting athletes of all ages and capabilities. Her continued involvement with school programs promotes and encourages more children to participate as well. She's given outstanding service to Athletics Victoria in that she's represented Victoria at the National Junior Track and Field Championships from 1993-94, and apart from 96-97 has competed at every national championship until 2011-2012. An amazingly endurable career. Tamsin has 18 national senior titles across 400, 800, 400 hurdles and 3 national junior titles over 400 and 800 metres. Her Athletics Victoria service history includes that she competed at Victorian State Championships from approximately 1994 to 2012 with many state titles over 200, 400, 800 and 400 hurdles. Currently holds a number of state records including under 16, under 17, 200, under 15, under 16, under 17 and under 18 400 metre records. Additionally, she's won the World Indoor 800 metres gold medal in 2008. I remember watching that run and thinking what an amazing run that was. Member of the 4x400 metre relay team that won gold at 3 consecutive Commonwealth Games in 1998, 2002 and then in Melbourne in 2006. Current Australian record holder for under 16 women's 400 and the indoor 400 metre and the 4x400 metre relay. In 2001, Tamsin was awarded the Young Victorian of the Year award. And in 2013, Tamsin was awarded the prestigious Edwin Flack Award by Athletics Australia. So a truly outstanding record there, Tamsin. And just adding to that, I've always admired that you were always up for competition. Put on a championship and Tamsin would be there. And you've always been enthusiastic and you've been a great encouragement to young athletes just starting out, I know that. So congratulations. The second Life Membership Award that we're giving tonight is to Lorraine Morgan. So if Lorraine could make her way to the front. Lorraine has held positions as a Victorian official from 1973 to the present. She's been on the Athletics Victoria Selection Committee from 1988 to 1992, an AV board member from 1992 to 95, and then again in 1999 to 2000, and has been AV competition director from 1995 until the present. Has provided outstanding service to Athletics Victoria nominated by AV onto the Athletics Australia board in 1990, represented the AV board on the Olympic Committee from 1992 to 1994, member of the Junior Development Committee 93 to 95, AV competition manager from 1995 onwards. AV Chief Judge, Throws and Jumps from 1982 to the present. AV Officials Education Presenter from 1996 to 2003. At the club level, has been club coach at Bentley McKinnon, Elwood Elsternwick and Glen Huntly Athletics Club. Committee member of Glen Huntly Athletics Club from 1983 to 2003. Vice President of Glen Huntly from 1996 to 2002. Outstanding service to the club, 1995 to 2000, AV Glen Huntly venue manager, 2000 life membership of Glen Huntly Athletic Club. Additional information, 96 to 2003 competition director of the IAAF Melbourne Challenge, 1997 AV Service Award, 2001 competition manager Goodwill Games Brisbane, 2000 the AV Merit Award, 2000 the Australian Sports Medal, 2001 Life Governor Athletics Australia, 2002 Medal of the Order of Australia. Outstanding achievements, Lorraine. Congratulations. We now move to item 6, and we have two speakers who are going to address us this evening. First, we're going to hear from Phil Jones, the CEO of Athletics Australia, and then he's going to segue into a presentation by Glenn Turner. So I'll just introduce, first of all, Phil Jones. Phil has been the CEO of Athletics Australia now for over 7 months. Initially, he was an interim CEO, just appointed as an interim, but then he picked up the permanent appointment a little bit later. And I have to say that he's been a very welcome appointment, has introduced a whole new culture at Athletics Australia, which is a much healthier culture than what was there previously. I shouldn't be saying that, but there we go. Before coming to Athletics Australia, Phil was 17 years as CEO with Yachting Australia, so he knows a little bit about the sporting world. Since becoming the CEO of Athletics Australia, Phil has been working very constructively with the states and territories and other stakeholders, and I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say tonight. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I wasn't given a time limit, but I'm just conscious that we don't want AGMs to drag on for too long. So I'll try and keep it reasonably succinct. First of all, I just want to express my congratulations to you, Ian, your board at Athletics Victoria, and obviously the many volunteers that make such an enormous contribution to the sport in Victoria. It is, I have to say, since I've been in the role, very much enjoyed working with Glenn and his team, and I'm looking forward to more of that. It was suggested tonight that I might spend some time talking about the Independent Review of Athletics, otherwise known as the Buchanan Review, and I'll push this simply to get that picture off the screen, if I may. This was reviewed, and I'm sure that many of you still have it by your bedsides and read it at night. Can I just see a show of hands? How many people have sort of perused the review? Okay, great, thank you. That's interesting. So if you've been through it, you'll appreciate that there are some fairly wide-ranging recommendations in here, and 18 actually, and sort of covering those sorts of areas. You know, the vision and strategic plan, governance effectiveness, management, and so on and so on. And it actually landed on my desk while I was still in the interim role. It's an interesting read, and I think you know, when you look at it and you look at that list of areas that the report covers, you'll appreciate that some of those, obviously, we can address sort of in parallel. So there's some things we can start doing immediately, and the governance effectiveness would be an example. And we've already started a board performance review, which will be reporting in September and informing the nomination for candidates for the Athletics Australia board in November. Work on a risk management framework and so on and so on. All those things have sort of started and they're in progress. There are some other things that are a bit more sequential in these recommendations. You know, for example, it's hard to have a performance management system until you've got a plan and understand, you know, the various responsibilities in that plan. So that needs to follow sequentially, as does a review, for example, of the athletics brand, which is one of the other things that the review sort of touches on. I suppose there's a few priorities as far as I'm concerned in this whole piece. And one of the issues, of course, is that there's a great danger with a review like this of actually being driven by the recommendations in the review rather than actually having a plan to move the sport forward. And so one of the priorities for us is to develop a long-term vision and strategy, not only for Athletics Australia, that would be relatively easy, but actually for the sport of athletics in Australia. Because the delivery of the sport in this country obviously isn't about only Athletics Australia. It's about the state organisations and obviously the many clubs that are involved in that process. And as you all know, a range of other stakeholders, masters, little aths, track and field coaches association. So there are a range of stakeholders that need to be engaged in this process. And I think there's two key components that in developing this plan that I'd sort of like to touch on. So in a normal process, you'd be going through the development of a strategic plan, and then you'd worry about the structure that you need to have in place to develop whatever's in that plan. We're in a slightly different position because I think there's two things that we really need to do immediately, because almost whatever the plan says, there's a couple of things we need to address. And one of those is very clearly the commercial position of the sport in its broadest sense. So at the moment, you know, we haven't got great products in the marketplace. We actually haven't got a great presence from a media perspective, I don't think, at this stage. You know, athletics should have a higher profile, I believe, in this country than it has. So the whole question of developing a commercial platform and actually doing things that make the sport more sustainable is going to be a challenge for us, whatever else the strategic plan says. The second thing that I think is a real key is that, you know, we clearly have a challenge around the culture within the sport, not at sort of club level, but really in the different organisations that exist. And until we've got a sort of common culture and a common thread and an agreement on how we all do things, getting stuff done is really difficult, because, you know, it's hard to have those conversations with different organisations that have a different view of life than yours when you want to make change. And there's no doubt that this sport will need to go through, you know, some change over the next few years. The society's changing around us, and we're going to need to change to reflect the different demands that the community has of sport. So two things that are key in the environment that we need to develop. One's commercial and the other is culture. And recently we've made a couple of changes and appointments in our management structure to try and reflect that. And you may have picked up on these, but we've employed a lady called Kitty Chiller. Kitty was a modern pentathlete. She is been to the Olympics a few times, and she's the chef de mission of the 2016 Olympic team. But we haven't employed her for that reason. She's looking after our whole, what we've described as people and culture piece. So she's started within the office now. She started about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and already we're seeing some change in the way, certainly within the office we operate. And Kitty was introduced to the member associations last week, and I think is going to make a huge difference, first internally, but then obviously working across the sport, because she's got some great skills in this area, and we're really working to try and sort of develop a sort of common culture, and that will be important in putting our plan together. We've also employed Tracy Gaudry. Tracy Gaudry, some of you may know, she was an ex-professional cyclist and ran the Amy Gillett Foundation for 6 years as the CEO. Great background in commercial development. She was a management consultant before she came to us, and before her time with Amy Gillett Foundation. So really great skills to bring to an organisation and a sport like athletics. So we've sort of started the change as far as the organisation is concerned, but I guess the key thing now is really the development of the vision and strategic plan. And in my experience, these processes there's two kind of extremes. One is somebody sits down and develops the plan and says, here's the plan, and sort of takes it out for a bit of consultation, which generally results in people sitting there going, and that's about all really, they just sit there. And you know, sometimes you get some feedback on a couple of words in the plan that aren't right, and you move on. The other is that everybody sits in a room and says, right, let's talk about the mission and vision with a whiteboard, and you know, that can be equally painful. So we're trying to find a balance in this in terms of how we develop a vision, but we actually consult with the community on that vision. I just want to take you through, I guess, a couple of points on the vision. Last year, before my time, the state associations sort of met, and this was the discussion they had about what they want to achieve together. So this isn't the vision, but there's some good pointers in here. So, you know, making the sport more accessible, attracting new people, and I'll come back to that with a bit of a good news story at the end. Transforming the identity of athletics, and I talked before about the profile of the sport and how we really want to raise that. Commercial sustainability, which again I've touched on, and our relevance in the marketplace. And I think, you know, when you look at where we are at the moment and the opportunities in front of us, those 5 pointers are good ones for us for the future. And I'm sure that they'll, you know, appear as themes as we develop this plan. Give you a bit of a timeline as to where we are. First of all, the consultation process has started. I first met with the member associations back in February. We've had a 2-day workshop in Sydney to talk about the strategic plan and some of the themes that need to go into it. Our next stage really is to finalise the scope of the vision to start with, and we're in the process of documenting that now. And then the next stage will be to discuss that internally before we take it out to the member associations for their input, and then refine that. And then in that period in October and November, we're really going to be focused on taking a draft out to the community for you to input to that plan. And you'll hear more from Glenn about that process, but the idea will be to have one or more meetings of groups of people to sort of discuss the draft, and there'll be an online portal for people to contribute back to this process. So that input is going to be really important. It's not going to be the end of the consultation, but that's when, you know, if you lock in your diaries, if you haven't heard anything of this by the 1st of October, please find out where that consultation is taking place and make sure you contribute to it, because we really want feedback to make sure that this vision is both contributed to by people and understood in terms of where the sport is going in the next 10 to 15 years. That'll be the sort of lifespan of this. And then we'll finalise that, and it will be published and promoted as widely as we can. And it's interesting, a number of sports have been through this exercise. Ours will be as concise as we can possibly make it, and we will, from there, be documenting a plan for Athletics Australia and more broadly the other stakeholders. And we're already talking to Little Athletics, to our state organisations, and to the other stakeholders about what that looks like, because everybody obviously will have a role in developing, in the plan, developing it from there. And then obviously there'll be an issue around costing it. So in terms of opportunities to contribute, state associations, so any input through Glenn at this stage, and then during that period in October and November, we'll be coming out with the state associations to talk to everybody about how that vision rolls out. And obviously we'll work with the state associations then to develop the plan. And if we're still alive at the end of December, that would be good. This process is I think, key for the sport moving forward. And one of the challenges, it seems to me, just coming from the outside, and I have no athletics background. Have I got 5 minutes to digress? Okay. When I first met the staff, I said, I really don't have an athletics background, but the interesting thing for me, I went to, very fortunate to go to the Olympics in 2012, not to watch the sailing, because sailing is pretty boring to watch. But my wife said, while we're going to the Olympics, we ought to go to Olympia. We have 2 children who at the time were 9 and 11. And we said we should go to Olympia and give them a flavour of what the Olympism is all about. And so we ended up for a day in Olympia. I don't know how many people have been there, but it is quite remarkable because you can actually see where the running took place and the hill where people watched. And I think recently they've even discovered the starting system that they used to use for the these races back 2,000-3,000 years ago. And I said to the team at the office, the interesting thing there was you couldn't see where anybody had played hockey or done sailing or done any of those things, but you could see where athletics was the absolute centre of sport. I mean, the fundamental sport, if you like. So, admittedly, now we don't do it naked as they did back then, which is probably a good thing. But nevertheless, you could see where you see how fundamental athletics is. So for me, it's a great privilege actually to be working in this role. Where was I? I think but what is interesting is that, I think we need to actually, that is a strength of athletics. It's, fundamental to so many other activities. What's encouraging to me, just as some parting information, if you like, the Australian Sports Commission have funded a program called Sporting Schools, which is rolling out now. 32 sports in the program. And the idea is that they're providing funding to schools to basically buy sessions of different sports. And I got the numbers earlier, and this is quite interesting. 477 schools, 149 of which are in Victoria, registered their interest in running athletics in Term 3. And of those, 122 have actually submitted expressions of interest, and that's 48 schools in Victoria. So, and probably the key number in all this is that athletics was the 3rd most requested sport of all 32 sports. So that to me reflects the level of interest there is from, youngsters in this country to get out there and do athletics. And what we've got to do is put programs in place that attract and retain those youngsters, that make it interesting and exciting, and all the elements of the sport that we know to be so important. We need to ensure that we're delivering that as regularly as we can, because those youngsters are obviously the health of this sport for the future. And so, I mean, there's some really, really positive things going on. And, it's interesting, since Kitty and Tracy joined the organisation 4 weeks ago, almost every day they say, God, the potential we've got is just enormous. And we've really just got to find got the processes in place to make sure we really grab that potential, because that's to the benefit of all of us, and not only to us, but to the benefit of the whole community, because obviously we know that there are some challenges around getting particularly young people off their backsides onto the track and onto the field. So very exciting to be here. Once again, my congratulations to Athletics Victoria. Ian, I know this is your sort of taking a sabbatical, if I could put it that way. I hope we see you back. I mean, it's been a pleasure to work with you in the short time that I've been working with you, and wish you every success. And to you, success for the season, and I hope things go well for all you as clubs, because you are a vital component, obviously, in the delivery of athletics. So thank you all very much.
Thanks very much, Phil. I'm going to introduce Glenn, our next speaker, even though he really needs no introduction. But after Glenn has spoken, we could take up to maybe 5 or 6 questions from the floor, if you want to ask questions either of Phil or Glenn. But we'll do that after Glenn has concluded. When the board first appointed Glenn, which is it's actually only a little bit over 2 years ago. It seems astonishing. There's been so much happen in the last 2 years. But when the board appointed Glenn, we appointed him with a mandate for change and for modernisation and for engagement, especially with our youth, with our young people. And I have to say, Glenn, that when I look at the statistics for the schools championships, the junior championships, and the whole way that the underage and youth has come along into our sport, it's certainly been the bright spot in our sport. And although our membership statistics are fairly static, looking at them over the last few years, if you look at the participation rates for our junior athletes and our young people in the sport, then they are showing fantastic improvement. And a lot of the credit for that goes to the changes that Glenn has brought in. Since he was appointed, he's hardly paused for breath. I think whether we've agreed with everything he's done or not, we'd have to concede that he's brought enormous energy to the task. I remember the first day that I saw Glenn in action after he was appointed was at the Sandown Relays, and there he was with a computer in front of him, working away with the officials there, and very much a hands-on person. And he's stayed that way. Every meeting that we have, whether it's a track meeting or a cross-country meeting, Glenn is there contributing to the whole process of the meeting and having a very big influence. I was lucky a few weeks ago to be at a function that was honouring the officials of Victoria, and many of you were at that function. And it was very moving for me to see the very high regard in which Glenn is held by that group in particular. But I think it really applies to all of us. So without any further ado, I'll welcome Glenn and ask him to make his presentation.
Well, thank you, Ian, for the very warm invitation to speak to you, and also thank you to everyone attending tonight, and hopefully I can keep you interested for the next 8.5 minutes. And what I want to basically walk through is a couple of points that Phil had addressed about the fantastic work that's occurred in the last 6 months since he's taken over as the CEO. There's some major projects that Phil's been able to secure and his team have been able to secure some funding for, which will basically look at, in simple terms, what teenagers want in relation to the sport of athletics. Along with that, there's an opportunity to do some research on why our athletes churn. For years, I think we've relied on a gut feel or a conversation or a certain set of commentary that comes from, whether it's around the Olympic Games. We've never had any tangible data to actually understand why people leave our sport. And thanks to a submission and a grant, Phil and his team announced last week that research paper will be coming. Many of you will recall that last year Tamsin Lewis had the honour of being the guest speaker. And of course, her speech was, and I know you're hiding up there, Tamsin, her speech was streamed via Athletics Victoria TV, and it scored its highest viewership at around 131, about 10 minutes into her address. And I will tell you right now that I'm fairly confident that I will come nowhere close to beating that record. So perhaps we can notch up another record for you, Tamsin. And as Ian said, I've had 2 years in this role, and I'll be completely blunt. There's been a considerable amount of change across many areas of the business. In the first year, we replaced what we used to call the old metro regions, and we introduced zones. We turned over 11 staff. We ran a significant deficit, which cleaned up some old issues, and we set about formulating a strategic plan around innovation, growth and flexibility. And it was interesting to hear Phil's commentary around the 3 different types of strategic plans that could be put together, and I think ours was the very first one where we spent a lot of time with the team looking at what we wanted to achieve, and I'm hoping that when you read it in July, none of you sat there looking blankly at it. We continue to support the joint initiative of the Victorian officials. We backed the coaching education framework, and we gave the team manager there a little bit of space to do what he does best. We challenged the summer competition pathway, and we analysed why and when people turned up to our events. And more importantly, we spent a lot of time on changing the event experience across all of our products. In year 2, we set the strategy in place to get the sport moving. We reduced the deficit from the previous year. We invested in technology. We rolled out a club support program to lay the foundation for longevity and capability. And we continue to work on our brand and more importantly, the way that we communicate to our stakeholders. And I'll talk about the elephant in the room now, in that our communication has been better, but our communication can be much better. And the board at various occasions have reminded myself, and also I've reminded the team, that we have to continually communicate. But we also need your help. We communicate to the best of our abilities through channels that we believe everyone has accessibility on a regular basis. What we'd like to hear from everyone in Clubland about is if things change or the communication process is not what you would prefer, then we're happy to change it. Because at the moment, we're going on the majority. We're trying to get involved with a better platform in the digital space, particularly with Snapchat and Twitter, and we're trying to build the relationship with youngsters. I know I'm 45 and I don't use Snapchat, and I don't know what Twitter is, but anyway, we'll work on that one. Overall, though, these outcomes have been really promising, and we've got a pretty committed and passionate team at Athletics Victoria. And I'm pretty happy to say that we didn't have any movement in any of the staff members in the last membership season. And we had more recognition and traction in relation to the AV brand. We increased the number of qualified coaches. We have a greater reach through our digital strategy. Our club capacity and numbers improve. We're retaining more of our teenage athletes in the 16 to 20-year-old bracket. And it hasn't just been one person that has been leading this. It's been a complete team effort, right from the top of AV right down into Clubland. And that's evidenced by the fact that our participation in event entry numbers for last year were up 7% in summer, and they're up 13.5% for winter. And Tim Crosby gave me an update today. Last year we were 13.5% above 2012-2014. Today we are 14.5% above last year. So the product is certainly attracting a lot more participation, particularly in the women's under 20 and open age groups in XCR, and also in the men. And hopefully that's come down to the event experience, amongst other things, that's improved considerably. And for the first time for a long time, we've received more positive feedback than negative feedback. But of course, there's much more that we need to do. And over the last 2 years, I've had the opportunity to speak to some members, competing athletes, officials, coaches, club administrators, and to get their thoughts on the sport. And often I would hear about the good old days, and in particular in track and field, how the state league competition was the winning formula for summer. And at that point, winter was going through a really big development phase. In particular, how the crowds would pour into Olympic Park and they'd line up for a race, and you'd see the likes of Scammell, Moneghetti, De Castella, or even Flintoff, Boyd, Stewart and Freeman, who would compete on a regular basis. And the question comes back on regular occasions, why can't we emulate that atmosphere in those competitions? It worked really well for clubs and athletes. What have we actually done over the last couple of years to try and fix the problem? And it becomes one of the consistent challenges for sport. As Phil said, we're competing not only against other sports, but technologies and Facebook and, you know, Xbox, and it's probably like Atari now. It's probably moved on to something else, but we're competing against so many other activities, and it comes down to a singular choice for an individual. But where we need to be, and I'm really confident in Phil's leadership and the changes that have been made, and it's a national position. We believe we're the right choice. So the task now is to have that conversation with as many people as we possibly can to say, yes, we know you've got a heap of choices, but pick us because we're the right choice. I suppose some of the changes that I've made have come about because I've had 25 years experience working in some bizarre and sometimes frustrating industries. And for me, about 2.5 years ago, came the realisation that I actually wanted to get back into athletics. And I kind of did it not in a straight line way, but kind of zigzagged over a period of 4 to 5 years. So with your blessing, I'm just going to quickly take you down a little bit of what's happened over the last 25 years. And hopefully you'll gauge that at the end of the day, I'm very passionate about the sport because I competed in it. I've been an administrator in other sports who have similar challenges. So the first stake in the ground is that I was born in 1969 in what was then called an outer suburb, which is now an inner suburb in Dandenong, or called Dandenong. And my parents decided to buy a business and move to Hobart in about 1974, and that's where I started my running career. And at the time, I was 10, and my mother in particular wanted me to do something after school because I was a pain in the ass. I was the youngest of 3 kids. There was 10 years between myself and my elder sister. They were working. You know, I'd come home from school. She was doing the chores, etc. So she got me involved with a club called the Sandy Bay Harrier Club down in Tassie. And all of a sudden, my involvement with athletics, which started off as a fleeting sort of 2-day-a-week, became a staple in my life. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the first couple of years, I would go to training, and I was coached by a stalwart by the name of Clive Froggy Wise, who was recognised nationally. And I can see a few heads from the younger members of the audience tonight who probably know Froggy. He was 65 when he started coaching me, and that was when I was 10. And amazing guy. We had 3 or 4 other fantastic officials that were recognised at the luncheon when I told parts of this story. Mavis Ebsbury was a starter. John Fox was a starter. Neil Littlejohn was a starter. Robin Hood. Yes, we had a guy called Robin Hood starting us. And so we had Robin Hood, Littlejohn and John Fox. And those officials actually created the experience for me. And I told the story to a lot of the Victorian officials about, because of that experience that I had, they looked after me from registration, they looked after me on the start line, they helped me with putting my blocks in, they nurtured my involvement, and they would provide praise and say, well done, good luck, congratulations. And to be perfectly honest, when I was 10, I was nothing more than a club runner. And I'm sure the Shield Committee will make me remember this when I tell you this story, but I would compete in 4 to 5 events on a Saturday every week across about 10 rounds of interclub. I was an okay sprinter. I did a bit of long jump, did a little bit of hurdles, and of course did the relay. And it wasn't until I was 15 that the proverbial all came into line. And in Hobart, we had grading system from A grade to I grade. And when I started at 10, I was in I grade. And as you progressed up and got better and better, you would move up a grade. And as a 10-year-old, trying to get to A grade was like trying to climb Mount Wellington. For people who've been into Hobart, it's pretty easy, but for some it's pretty difficult. And so at the time, I just wanted to get into A grade. And I remember that the Mercury newspaper, which was the local rag down there, would have a story every day of the week. So I produced the paper Monday through Friday and a special edition on Sunday. And every day it had a story about athletics in there. And the one free-to-air television station, which was called Channel 6, they would regularly have vision from interclub and or state championships from the Domain Athletics Centre. And it was a great platform to start. There was thousands of people in the stands. And it was a community. It had soul. It had purpose. And then all of a sudden in '89, they invented the web and they released it to the public in 1991 and things started to change. And change will be inevitable and we need to be flexible and we need to look at what's happening around us. But I'll talk about that a little later. I want to do something particularly self-indulgent and talk about myself for a second. I actually managed to get into A grade at 16 in the 100 metres when I clocked 10.8, which was a hand time, but I had a 1.9 metre tailwind to help me. I eventually moved up to the 400 and broke 50 seconds when I was at the back end of my 16th year. And at that point, my coach, who was a wonderful lady and also an athlete herself, she challenged me and said, you know what? She said, you've raced week in, week out here in Hobart. She said, I think we need to go to the mainland. And at that time, it was a treacherous journey for a young fella to go to Australia. And I entered the Victorian Under-18 Youth Championships in February 1987. Now, sidebar, for the officials that have heard this story, I've kind of changed it a little, so please pay attention. It was also the year, February 87, when Melbourne had its massive heat waves. It had a series of about 6 weeks where the temperature soared to about 40 degrees. And it so happened that I was racing on that weekend. I raced in the 200 and 400. In the 400, I ended up making the final, only to be beaten by a St Stephen's Harriers athlete and current AV Coach of the Year, a guy by the name of Stephen Ellinghouse, who whipped me by 0.3 of a second. He ran 49.22 and I ran 49.51. But the competition experience that I had there made me yearn for more, and so I returned to Van Diemen's Land 3 days later, and I'd end up racing in the Open 400 at the state championships. This is as a 17-year-old against men that were 5 to 7 years my senior. And not only would I surprise myself, but my family and coach, because not only did I win the state title, I ran 47.8 and knocked 2 seconds off the PB in 1 week, and managed to qualify for the World Juniors in Canada in 1988. Although I didn't end up racing at the World Juniors for various reasons, I still did go away with the team. What I learned was that there is a pretty difficult rigour when it comes to international travel and competition. And I'm sure Mr. Carew would second that. We had a 6-week tour across 2 continents, 6 countries that would cut across 2 terms of law that I was also studying at university at the time. And it actually meant that I had to add another year on the other end. So my 5-year degree became a 6-year degree. But it was kind of worth it just for that 6-week period to wear the green and gold. And that experience was like, it carved I suppose, a pathway for me in what I wanted to do in my professional career. And I ended up graduating from law in '92. I worked in Hobart for a little while. I then came back to Melbourne in 1996 and worked for Sander Finance. And one of the projects I did, and hopefully everyone will get that there's a lot of morals in the stories that I'm talking about. One of the projects we had to do was the introduction of the Uniform Credit Code, which back in those days was bringing the power back to the individual and taking it away from the banks, because the banks were, pulling people's houses, selling stuff, interest rates around 16, 17%. And part of the role was about change management and seminars for not only our customers, but for brokers, for staff members. And when the contract completed in 1988, I'd basically been, as a 27 or 28-year-old, the lead on talking to bankers and customers and so forth that had portfolios with so many zeros you can only imagine. And it was important that they heard and understood what the Uniform Credit Code actually meant. And it was kind of uplifting because I was creating the experience for these people. I was giving them the information in order to guide them into a certain direction. And after the contract finished, I worked for a little PR company across the road here at Albert Road called M Communications, and it was run by a lady by the name of Sue Maynard. And that organisation had landed 4 of the major sponsors for the 2000 Olympic Games, being Westpac, CUB, Ansett and Holden. And our role was to facilitate the PR strategy and also the marketing strategy, where they'd paid somewhere around 100 to 120 million each for being naming right partners. And again, it was another experience where I landed on my feet, got some fantastic mentoring from Sue, but understood how major potential players were getting involved in a sport, and one of the biggest sports that Sydney had certainly seen in that particular decade. I then flipped the coin and went back to law and worked at Telstra, surprisingly in litigation and dispute resolution, fixing problems basically, or at least trying to navigate my way through them. And then after leaving there in 2006, I had a couple of months off to go and follow my other passion, which is baseball. So I spent 3 months in the United States following the Cubs, and came back in 2006, and I landed a job in V8 Supercars, and they wanted a general counsel, and part of the role there was to help the transition. At the time, V8 Supercars had been on Channel 10 for 11 years, and they'd just been offered about $90 million to move to Network 7. And there was a whole lot of work that we needed to do. We had to establish our own television production studio. We had 3 international races, including China, Bahrain and Abu Dhabi. And we also negotiated a new license agreement for all of the team owners. And we had to do that because V8 Supercars was losing its viewership. The racing was becoming boring. And with the help of the team owners, we changed the race format. We introduced new compound tyres. We rewrote the rules to make the rules of racing easier for the punter. We also changed the brand profile and really focused on what we call the tribal concept, which is Ford v Holden. There was no other. There was no Mercedes. There was no Fiat. There was no Audi. There was no Volvo. It was you're either Ford or you're Holden. It's like, dare I say it, you're either Carlton or Collingwood. It made no difference. But the tribal factor was that sense of belonging that people had to a particular choice. So we decided to capitalise it, and one way we did that is that we actually controlled the vision. So V8 Supercar Television put the package of the TV together, which was fantastic because on Facebook people would kick the crap out of 7, but 7 had no control over the footage whatsoever. It was all us. 355 people it took to do Bathurst. We had 81 cameras up and down the mountain, and I had the opportunity to sit there on several Bathursts as the in-house legal counsel, making things happen. There was no opportunity to sit back. You had to get in, and if, for example, the producer needed to go to the nature stop, you were in there calling the shots. It was an amazing experience, and as you can imagine, I learned quite a lot about how you can tell your story and how you can influence it out in the marketplace. And when we made some of the changes, we had more pit lane reports. We started profiling all of the drivers. We humanised them and talked about their families and their kids and their pastimes and what they loved to do. And as a result, ratings began to soar. More people came to the events. And surprisingly, sponsors began to knock on our door and ask us to be partners. I did make the page of the Courier of the Advertiser in Adelaide. They snapped me holding a ladder, and that was my one role at Clipsal one year, is that someone needed to take a photograph of the grid, and so the photographer, who was only 4'9", needed the assistance of a ladder, and I was the only person. And yet again, right smack bang in the middle of Clipsal, it's an amazing experience. But it made the second inside page saying V8 Supercar General Counsel holds ladder at Clipsal to prop up series. I then had the privilege of working with these two blokes, Dick Johnson and his partner at the time, Charlie Schwerkold. Dick was a legend of the sport, and he was very set in his ways. He'd made some pretty poor financial decisions and partnered with some pretty dubious characters. One person in particular, who's a former Newcastle resident who's just written a book. He owned a rugby team but couldn't pay his bills. I think his name's Nathan Tinkler. Anyway, Dick's decisions were woeful, and he lost $4 million in 12 months. So we had a recovery plan which basically was about getting the right people into the right positions within the business, and it also meant that somebody had to explain to Dick's son, Stevie J, who was one of the two drivers in the team, that he wasn't going to get or may not automatically get a seat in one of his dad's cars the next day, and you can imagine who the bunny was that had to tell him that. We had a rolling strategic plan for the team. We embarked on 4 key areas. We recruited a driver that could win the championship. We aligned with a manufacturer that could build a good race car. We built a better merchandise range, and we bought it all in-house. And we created more opportunities for sponsors, things that we could actually sell. So by the start of 2009, we hired this bloke, a guy by the name of James Courtney. We contracted with 888 Race Engineering, who built us 3 new FG Falcons. We bought on 3 Mobile, Toshiba, Reed Property Group and Roland to the factory. And we restructured the race team. And we contracted a service for a 3rd race car, which was Techno Autosports, a guy by the name of Jonathan Webb. So the 2-year strategy was in full, and by the end of 2010, Courtney would win the V8 Supercar Drivers' Championship against all odds. It was a rainy day in Sydney. For those of you, is there anyone who is a motorsport fan, or is this just like not going anywhere? Tamsin, to my rescue. Another 3 viewers, thank you very much. My point, though, is that we were not the most financially supported team in pit lane, but what we were able to do is make really smart decisions and stick to the strategy that we agreed on when we first started this project. And we also had to make some pretty tough decisions to actually achieve the result. But in all these experiences, there is a consistent concept of change. And hopefully everyone can actually see that, and the roadmap to athletics is not dissimilar to some of the experiences that I've been part of. And it's actually reflected in what we're about to roll out next. Whether we like it or not, we need to acknowledge that things need to be flexible, and Phil has touched on it. We need to adapt, and we need to change. And sometimes that change is good, sometimes it's average, and sometimes it's just not palatable. But at the end of the day, if the change is coming, then we all need to be on the same wavelength, and we all need to speak the same language. So getting back to the meat, probably why most of you are here to listen to what's happening at Athletics Victoria. Stage 2 of the strategic plan focuses on exploring opportunities and changing perceptions. And in that process, there's no sacred items in stage 2, but there's some really fantastic projects coming along. The first one is in relation to the membership. We've spent a lot of time looking at some of the barriers, and the membership offering, which has been around for a considerable amount of time, is one of the barriers to participation. So next year we are intending to unhook the membership and make it more user-friendly. In addition, there'll be incentives for early payments. There'll be incentives for discounts for all competitors that choose to compete, whether it's in cross-country or whether it's in track and field. Every member will have access to a $20 discount via an incentive scheme to pay their AV and club membership. We know that participation in the sport is relatively cost competitive, and one of the issues that we have is that we don't have, I suppose, the space or the aptitude for monthly debits and for keeping the necessary information that we need to do, like many of the other sports. Hence the reason why the incentives for all of our club members will now be offered, provided that fees are paid by a certain date. So members will control the process, and they can take advantage of the incentives. If a member just wants to compete in XCR, they can do that, provided they pay their club membership fee and their AV fee. If they just want to compete in track and field, they can just compete in track and field. At any point through the process, if they change their mind and say, I want to do both, they will receive a discount. And of course, there will be safety measures in place to ensure that the system is as fair as it sounds. So more information about the specifics will be coming in the next couple of months. But this is one of the first projects that we are going to roll out. In addition, we're going to open up the boundaries. For many years, there's been a convention around reciprocal rights from other members of other states that compete. Having a forum, and we've had about 12 since I started with the CEO's National Conference, but the other CEOs are all in agreement that we will formulate a reciprocal rights program where somebody is a member of another state member association. Then for a small fee, they can compete, they can be eligible to join a club and then compete for that club in another state, whether it be in Shield or whether it be in cross country. In simple terms, to give you an example, there's a club in the Peninsula Way who has got a great relationship with a number of athletes in Tasmania. At the moment, the process is that the club generously pays the registration fee for the athlete, and we provide some assistance when it comes to an entry. We are going to remove that barrier, again, to make it fair and to make sure that we don't jeopardise our current members. We've also been speaking to the Victorian Athletic League, and these are ways of driving membership, and these are ways of what Phil often refers to at our CEO meetings as low-hanging fruit. Wasn't that funny, Tamsin, was it? Victorian Athletic League athletes, they'll receive a reduced membership if they want to participate in Shield or at state competitions. Not only are we talking to VAL, but we've started the negotiations with Triathlon Victoria. Tri-Vic have got a high-performance team of about 80 athletes ranging from 13 up to masters. And they've approached us asking some assistance in relation to some track time trials over the 1500 and 5K. While the final details are being worked through, we'll have potentially another 80 people or triathletes who will be accessing our services and will be open to clubs to discuss and potentially become members of those clubs. And can I just acknowledge this suggestion was from Craig Marnie at the Sandown Relays, and I thanked him before, but he pointed out that this was a great opportunity to look outside the box, and it's been a very fruitful discussion. Coach education is also one of our major pillars, and Phil talked about the Sporting Schools program, which effectively is an opportunity for every primary and high school to have access to $1,700 to run a sporting program. But the sporting program can only be administered by 32 or 31 NSOs. Looking at the take-up rate in Victoria, we've been preparing for this for about the last 4 or 5 weeks. And as well as upskilling a number of coaches, our existing coaches, in order to give them an opportunity to earn some money to do what they love, one of the things that we were concerned about is if this thing goes off as well as it does, we might not necessarily have the workforce to meet the demand straight away, which is actually a very good problem to have. So we came up with a joint approach with Athletics Australia where we said, well, instead of actually dealing with the demand, and we will still do that, why don't we get the IAAF Kids program into the school curriculum? Now, the initial conversation was it can't be done, hasn't been done before. I'll tell you, we're 90% there. We approached School Sport Victoria and we had the conversation saying that athletics is a foundation sport. We have the ability to teach people about basic movement in a fun and active environment. And hopefully, touch wood, within the next 3 or 4 weeks, we'll have more information about whether the IAAF Kids program, which is an 8-week program, will be trialled in Year 6 in primary schools around Victoria. Now, if that's the case, coaches will have the opportunity to upskill teachers within the school curriculum. Fundamental change in the education arena, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of. No longer do they have designated PE teachers. It's usually a task that's given to a teacher who's there for one of the other disciplines. We are able to have the conversation with these teachers who look after physical activity. We can upskill them. We can help provide them with the syllabus, which is an 8-week program about, as I said, about basic movement. But it gives them an opportunity to get the kids ready for whatever it is that they want to do in the future. If they want to play soccer, if they want to play AFL, they want to do whatever they like. The first touch point that they have is with someone from Athletics Victoria. Little Aths are right on board with this as well. We will be providing marketing collateral and fun stuff so that if the kids do want to do something after school, they can join one of their local centres. There'll be follow-ups. The LAPS program will continue to be offered to that school. And where we're basically at with Little Aths and Athletics Victoria is we do not care where a person enters into the athletic framework, as long as they do. We don't own the athletes. They're not little athletes. They're not senior athletes. They're people that want to participate in a healthy, active lifestyle. And that in itself is a fundamental change. And it's a fundamental change because, we have to look outwards as opposed to looking down the channel. We're in a really good position. We've got a great message. We've got a great product. And we could have a bigger product and we could have more people. And the more people that come along will mean that club sustainability and club capability increases. A couple of the conversations that I've had is about sustainability. There are one or two people that drive the soul of so many of our clubs in Victoria. And a lot of them are tired. And a lot of them are finding it difficult to find people to come onto their committees and to help with the workload. If I asked how many clubs struggle to find club helpers for XCR or track and field events, I reckon nearly 61 hands would go up automatically. We are trying to design and have designed stage 1 of the Club Connect program to help address some of these issues. And it is about sustainability and succession planning. It's about how we communicate. And I'm sure there's many of you that will sit here and go, well, that's all great, but I'm just a volunteer. I don't have the time to do all this sort of stuff. We are here to assist. We're not here to be a public servant. We're here to be somebody that can provide the assistance in order to build the sport. And it doesn't matter if it takes 2 weeks or it takes 2 years. The fact is that we are all in this together and we're here to help. And we say we're here to help. And Kirby and her team in club development will roll out stage 2 around all of these areas: recruitment, marketing and communications. And one of the sacred, I suppose, items that I mentioned before is that for a long time we've had a minimum membership of clubs of 20 people or 15 in the country region. And that's put a lot of pressure not only on the clubs in that environment but also on all of the services provided. Perhaps, and I'm stressing the word perhaps, the solution is to raise that number to 50 by 2018. By increasing the number, it means that there are more resources available to do the things that you love, which is to create the club environment, to create the soul, and to create a social opportunity for our members. Very quickly, because I know I'm probably well and truly over time, we also talk about this thing about a brand. It's the way we communicate. It's the logo. It's the target talent program, which you see down here. All these fantastic ideas like Knockout and competition pathways have all got separate brands. It's the way we communicate and identify the things that we're producing and should be very proud of producing from Athletics Victoria. Competition pathway. We've now provided multiple pathways for people to what we call move in and out of. They can choose to start as a club runner. They can come back in as a national competitor if they so choose to. And we seem to be firmly focused on, I suppose, quantity of competition. And look, we've got a discussion point later on in the meeting. It's not the quantity of the competition that's now important, right? It's what happens during that competition. And there's a distinct difference. You can have 100 rounds of shield, but if the 100 rounds of shield, for example, go for 7 hours or 2 hours or 4 hours or don't have any change or don't have any environment in which someone can walk away and say, I really enjoyed that, and they went and told 3 or 4 people and built a network of touch points where, Frankston and people from Mornington Peninsula could all get together and enjoy the things that we're all very passionate about. And of course, we all know that there's challenges with competition pathways. I'm not going to dwell on it or go into too much detail. There's a bit more detail about the excellence of delivery in the annual report. But the key points that I wanted to talk about is our relationship with Little Athletics Victoria is growing stronger and stronger. Our calendars now are decided at the same time. We try and avoid clashes. We try and make sure that our officials are not walloped week after week after week with competition. Unfortunately, we don't have the ultimate choice. We have to compete against other mainstream events. We have to compete against schools. And we try and do the best possible thing that we can with the 64 weekends or thereabouts, the 100 weekends that are available. A third of them are taken away with holidays. Then another 10 are taken away with existing competitions. And it has been a challenge, but without the support of Dean and his team, I don't think we would have improved the pathway. One other major is that Little Athletics Victoria will no longer be offering state championship competition for under 16s, under 7s and under 8s. which is a fantastic concession, which means that from a dual perspective, athletes will stop at under 15, and if they want to compete in the under 16 competition, then they'll come to Athletics Victoria. And we keep on working with little A's, and we keep on working to this concept of one sport. And to finish off, Phil mentioned the whole of sport, and the people that came in had a look at it from a high level and couldn't quite understand why the organisations existed on their own. They existed on their own because they existed on their own. There is no rhyme or reason. The question is, do they need to be completely 100% merged? I have a view. The board of AV has a view. For us, we share the same office space, we share events, we share pathways, we share calendars, we share staff. We do stuff together, not because one of us owns the athlete or owns the competition. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And it's the right thing to do to provide a very accessible, inclusive and open and really transparent opportunity for people to participate in athletics. So there's a lot happening, there's a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of changing perceptions. And I know that over time we'll roll these out, and as Phil mentioned, in September, October, there's an opportunity for all clubs to participate, particularly in the national vision. I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate your patience. I also acknowledge that I've gone a little over time. But I hope that you can see how enthusiastic I am about the position that I have, and that the experiences that I've had in my working life are actually helping, I suppose, to carve out what is the next vision and what is the next strategic position for the sport. So on that note, I'm more than happy to take any questions, and hopefully the first one's for Phil.
Thanks, Glenn. We do have time for about 3 questions, so if there are any questions, could you indicate, please? Yes.
Let me start. One thing that I forgot to mention that was probably on the slide, the CEOs of both the senior and the little athletics member associations had their first summit here in, actually in the Cathy Freeman Room in February, and it was one of the very first questions that we asked each other. So we had 16 CEOs, and one of the fundamental problems is we all have a perception and gut feeling as to why people churn, which is the terminology that Littles use, at under 13. That gut feel's now been turned into a funding grant that Little Athletics Victoria now has. They've got a 48% churn rate at the top end, and they are now going to go back and interview, an exit interview type process for all of those kids that leave Little Athletics. We did talk about the elephant in the room, and that was the perception and the conversation that people involved in Little Athletics, and to a certain degree people have in senior athletics, about each other. And it's probably a point that I should have discussed in more detail. We often forget to speak about the positives. We tend to speak about the negatives because it may not have any connection with us. And for a long time we were feared for some reason. If you go to big athletics, you'll never have the same experience. If you go to big athletics, you won't have an opportunity to compete at the national level. So there was this underlying communication strategy that we needed to implement, and we've all agreed that we will only speak positively about each other's products, which is a huge milestone, I must admit, because there are 121 centres here 114 now, in Victoria, and there are 61 clubs. There's a lot of kids. There's 25,500 registered Little A's people, of which 12,500 of them are churning out every year and won't go into seniors. So we've agreed on a national level to put in a strategy about how we communicate about each other. That's the first thing. The research paper will give us an indication as to why they leave. Some of them leave to go and play footy. Some of them are poached in junior development squads in rugby, netball, soccer. And so we'll have better data to actually understand that. And then we'll create a comm strategy to say, well, hang on a minute, we need to look at what is the process. And one suggestion is to treat the pathway from under nines right through to masters as like a graduation process. What do we do in school? In primary school, if we have K to 12, there's kind of a mini graduation at year 6. And that's when you thanks very much, I'm out of primary school, I'm into high school. That we don't do that. We need to do it, and we need to have a closer alignment. The good thing that's come out of the relationship is we now have at least 4 that I'm aware of, clubs and centres that are looking at shared resources and the prospects of potentially merging at a centre level and club level, which is a fantastic position to be in. And 3 years ago, you would never have imagined that at all. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just briefly, I think the probably the key issue here, we probably don't know enough about why that churn takes place and where they go, because it does seem to me for a sport like athletics, because we're teaching and kids are developing fundamental skills, that sometimes they are going to go to other sports, and I don't think we should worry about that too much. The issue would be if they stop doing athletics and then go on PlayStation. We should start worrying about that, which I think is reasonably contemporary PlayStation. I can get away with that. So I think that's one issue. And I think, but it does seem to me that the issue of, and Glenn touched on this, the question of the relationship with Little Athletics really needs to be about how we align so that the pathway is very clear. And at the moment, it seems to me that's not. I mean, somebody said to me when I started, if you've got a beard and you can drive yourself to training, you're probably not in Little Athletics. And it does seem to me, therefore, that we really need to address that question. And for me, this is going to be really about the product offering that we have for those youngsters that come through Little Athletics. And it's interesting, I think one of the challenges we face, the Sporting Schools program is really about fundamental movement, and that's what the IAAF program delivers. And I think the challenge we've got with youngsters coming through that program who say, right, I want to pursue this, is when they go to Little Athletics, it's going to be a very different experience. And so, I think it's easier for us, if you look forward, what we probably end up with is what you might describe as the conventional athletics pathway, which we have now, and a series of complementary products that youngsters can get involved in that sort of fundamental movement. It's a different kind of offering that we need to have, because that's what young people are sort of looking for. So you could see how, clubs could have a series of product offerings that they might offer, and they might even be from the same age group, but offering different things and pushing different buttons as far as the young people are concerned. The research we're doing at the moment in the sort of 13, 14-year-olds and how we attract them, all the feedback is, athletics has got this image, you've just got to be good at it to do it. There's nowhere to hide. It really exposes you. So, only good youngsters keep doing it, because they kind of go, those that aren't so good just go, I don't want to be exposed in this way. So and I want to do it with my friends. I don't want to do it by myself. So there's a range of things, I think, that, the expectation that youngsters have and what's going to turn them on to athletics as opposed to the other sports, we need to start looking at it from the consumer point of view at that age, rather than necessarily the offering we currently have. So there's quite a bit to do, I think, in that whole pathway piece. And it seems to me, that the elements are really about having, a club with offerings that are going to be attractive and very well defined, so people can look at it and go, that's what I want. That's what it's going to give me when I get there. And you know, some sports that have got really strong junior programs. I mean, I think AFL springs to mind. I mean, there's probably that many different ways you can do AFL, but the product is the same wherever you go, and people understand what they're going to get, and parents understand what they're letting themselves in for. So we've got to have, I think, those kind of well-defined products in the marketplace that go, okay, this fits in terms of what the community is actually looking for in terms of getting involved. Sorry.
Good, thank you. Another question, Peter?
All the talk is about 8-year-olds to 20-year-olds and 19-year-olds. Most of those people, or athletes, are subsidised, paid for by their mums and dads, and there's no real talk about adult athletes, that is athletes from 19 to 35. How we people get them into sport, because children, young people are looked after by mum and dad, with fed, clothes and everything, and their life is sort of set up. And we're looking at saying, hey, young adults or adults need to be actively participating in sport. So all the focus is that the young people, we're losing them. Coached for 30 years, how many athletes have I coached that have become adults? Not many, or adult athletes. This guy here is one of the few people that I coach that become an adult athlete. What are you doing to get people to become adult athletes?
Okay. We'll just get a quick response here.
Good question. Yeah.
They are the people who are then out in employment and can afford to pay $160
Club membership.
to be registered people. They're self-sufficient.
So I think the answer is, it goes back. I don't think the feedback we're getting from the 13 and 14-year-olds would be that different from the 21, 22-year-olds about an interesting. Our high-performance director makes a really interesting observation. If the challenge with athletics in Australia is that if you're not good, you stop. And if you're not able to get to the next level, you stop. You don't carry on and compete for the benefits that in other and this is a huge generalization, I know. You don't carry on for the benefits that's going to give you. You actually, when you get to a point, you go, this isn't now offering me anything more. I think, it's my, again, generalization. My sense of it is that we've got to do more things differently by way of competition that allow people to continue for the benefits that athletics gives you, not simply because you want to get up to the next level, because not everybody does that. We don't have, if we did that, we'd have, 750 people at the Olympics because they'd all be at that level. Well, they're not. So, and I think, we've got to ask ourselves the question is what we're actually offering now on an ongoing basis enough to keep people at 21, 22, 23 enough relevant to 21, 22 that's actually going to keep them going. So I think we've got to sort of start thinking outside, and we'll always have those. Don't get me wrong. We'll always have great athletes that are going to move through that system, and we need to. That's our fundamental offering, but we've got to have things that are complementary for those youngsters and late teens, early 20s that go, I'm not going to. That's not going to be where I go, but I do want to keep doing it, and I think that's a. We look at it, but look at what's happening in recreational running, where people are doing that because of the fitness benefits and all the other things that gives you. And if you look at what's happening in the fitness industry, I guess I don't do this, but some of the I've forgotten what it's called now. What's the stuff where they're going to the gym in the it's CrossFit. Thank you. So what's the athletic, let me put this to you, what would be the athletic answer to CrossFit? Because people are flooding to CrossFit, so we've actually got to come up with something, I think, that uses athletics as the basis for that and goes, because we could do it a lot less expensively, we do it outside. I mean, Australia's got, why would you go into the gym to keep fit when you can do athletics outside? Don't know. But that's I think we've got to look at the positioning, because the positioning now is such that, you're right, people aren't sticking with it. And we need to look at what products are going to keep them in. Sorry.
You're absolutely right. The fundamental piece, and this is the last thing that I'll say, because I know Ian wants to keep going. One of the things that we have not been good about is telling the story and communicating. And it's not communicating, and we haven't deliberately picked out that age group at 13 to 16 because that's where we think we need to start. We've picked that age group out because at the moment there's 440,000 kids that currently go to year 6, 7 and 8, right, or thereabouts. We have 750 dual athletes registered with Athletics Victoria. What are the other 438,000 kids doing? And starting that conversation and saying, you can get involved in a healthy, active lifestyle. It'll actually provide you with some assistance to understand about your body for when you do X, Y, whatever training you want to do. And that touch point at 12 will last forever. And without sounding like a pragmatic tool, it happened when I was 10, and it's happened in countless other examples and stories. Lynn Owen, for example, had her 2 girls going through little athletics. She then came back and got involved in Frankston because she just loved the sport and she wanted to get involved with it. And each of these stories we need to tell because they're infectious and they start the ball rolling. Nick Wall has spent the last 2 years, along with his team, building up the 14 to 16-year-olds in the Target Talent Program and both of his squads. We had our largest entry in under 18 and under 20 at the junior championships in track and field for over 5 years. But he started 3 years ago. And there are countless other scenarios. The clubs are focusing on the junior athletes because that's the touch point where they'll remember what a fantastic experience I've had, and they're more likely to stay in the sport.
Time for just one question. Yes, please. I'm going to take that. I respect what you've said. A lot of good ideas thrown up there, and not particularly questions that I want to put to Phil and Glenn just at the moment, because I think it would take them a long time, and we're getting short of time. But the ideas you raise are very good ideas, and I can assure you that the board has addressed some of those ideas, particularly looking at year-round continuity of competition in the various disciplines, rather than having the winter season and the summer season. So that's just one thing, one example. So thank you for your contribution there. We are running short of time. I'm becoming a little concerned, so we will move on fairly quickly. I know you've been sitting for a long time, but we've got a bit to get through yet. Before moving to item 7, the annual report, I did stuff up again a little earlier when I was introducing the Life members, and I introduced Anne Lord. I wanted to say something, and I'm going to get Anne to stand up. I know she won't want to, but Anne, I think we need to publicly acknowledge the award that was made to you in the Queen's Birthday Honours of an AL. I'm really making a mess of the agenda tonight. It's just as well it's my last AGM in the chair. If we move on to the annual report then, the annual report has been circulated, and I hope you've all had a chance to read it. In my view, it's the best annual report we've had put together. So you've had a chance to read it, and I think I'm not going to open it up for discussion in particular. It is a report. It's quite a lengthy document, as you all know. I'll just simply ask for someone to move and second that the annual report, this is aside from the financial statement, that the annual report be received and adopted. Would somebody so move? Good, thank you. And your name is? Okay, good, thank you. And a seconder? Good, thank you, Lynn. And all those in favour? And against? Carried, thank you. I know you haven't had a long time to read the annual report, but it's well worth reading, and there's some really good things in there, particularly about competitions, but also other things as well. We'll move on to item 8, the financial statement, and I'm going to hand over to our Treasurer, Eric Sigmund. Thank you, Eric.
Good evening, fellow members. In the interest of time, I won't go into this in great detail, but if you do have hard copies of the annual report here, that's good. Otherwise, they are available on the website. Page 42 gives the statement of financial position, or balance sheet as it used to be called. The bottom line on that page is we're showing net assets or equity of $717,000, and at the very top of that page you'll also see we've got cash of around $400,000, and that was also made mention by Glenn in his report. So we're in a fairly healthy position there. On page 43 we've got the statement of profit or loss. You will see that we did make a small or medium-sized loss of $74,000, but that was expected to be a loss, about $50,000 over budget. You'll also see comparisons on each page for previous years. We also have notes to the accounts further on, from page 51 onwards. And we also have the signed statement by the auditor on page 56. So I won't go into any further detail, but obviously if you have questions, I'll answer them now. But we've also, Ian Jones and myself have signed or warranted that the AV is in, the accounts have been prepared in a professional manner by the accountants here. They've been audited by the auditors, and they've represent a true and fair value of the association at the end of the balance date on 31 March 2015. So, do we have any questions on the report? There being no questions, I move that the. Do you want to move that, Ian? I move that these financial statements be accepted.
Is there a seconder for that? Good, thank you.
All those in favour? All those against? Thank you very much.
The next item we come to, item 9, is regarding our constitution, and I can assure the meeting that this is really pretty much of a formality. Due to changes in state legislation, it required AV, along with other organisations, to make amendments to their constitution to fall in line with the requirements of the state legislation. Therefore, we have gone through our constitution and just made those amendments. None of them change the sense of the constitution in any shape or form. They're really just editorial type changes. So, as a result of this, the constitution will become known as the rules of Athletics Victoria. Now, that's going to take us a little bit of getting used to, because we've had other documents that we regard as the rules. So we're going to have to adjust to that, another one of the changes that we're going to have to accommodate. But the board is putting forward the motion that the changes to the constitution be accepted, and the way we've done it is to simply abolish the old constitution and reintroduce it with the amendments as the rules of Athletics Victoria. So I'll move from the chair that we accept the changes and we adopt the rules of Athletics Victoria Incorporated as they have been circulated. And even though I've moved it from the chair, I will ask for a seconder for that motion. Just as a formality. Would somebody be prepared to second that motion? Good. Thank you, Chris O'Connor from Box Hill. And I'll put that motion. All those in favour and against? Thank you very much. That's carried overwhelmingly, or without dissent, I think would be the correct terminology. Moving on now to a very pleasurable part of the agenda. We've had pleasurable parts of the agenda, of course. But the awards is always a highlight of the agenda. And I'm pleased to say that the board is in the position of recommending several life memberships to the board. In fact, well, I'll proceed straight to those life memberships, but before I do, I will thank the awards subcommittee of Len Johnson, Paul Jeans, and chaired by Maureen Austin, who have placed these recommendations to the board. First one is Lavinia Petrie, member of Ringwood Athletics Club since 1966 and has held a number of positions during her involvement with athletics, including the AV Cross Country Team Manager from 2000 to the present, Region and Zone Secretary from 2010 to 2015, Victorian Official from 2000 to the present at zone and state events. Lavinia has been and continues to be a pioneer of women's distance running, has many state and national titles and records to her name, including 7 World Masters records from 3,000 metres to the marathon. Last year, Lavinia was awarded the IAAF Female Masters Athlete of the Year, recognising not only her world records, but her service to the sport. The recommendation is that Lavinia Petrie be awarded life membership of Athletics Victoria, and I'll ask you to approve that by acclamation. Thank you. The next one is Don Blythe, another very well-known name in athletics. Don was the General Manager of Athletics Victoria from December 1997 to 2003 and then returned to take up a position as Officials Development Officer from 2007-08 until 2012-13. Don has been officiating in some capacity at local and state level for 31 years and continues to officiate at rounds of Shield in Blue Zone. He was appointed as Chief Mentor of the Victorian Officials Committee in 2014 and as a member of the Victorian Officials Committee. Don has been a continuous and loyal supporter of Athletics Victoria and is well respected and qualified as an official. The recommendation is that Don Blythe be awarded life membership of Athletics Victoria. Another very well-known name, Steve Monaghetti. Steve joined Ballarat Harriers Athletics Club in 1977-78, then moved to Ballarat YCW in 1981-82 and has been a member there ever since. He has been a member of the Ballarat YCW board in a number of roles and has regularly competed for the club, even in the many years he was competing internationally, and is still currently running for the club. Steve was made a life member of Ballarat YCW Club in 2013. In athletic achievements, in international competitions, he attended 4 Olympic Games, 4 Commonwealth Games, 6 World Championships and 10 World Cross Country Championships. Steve has competed in national championships in both track and field and cross country from 1991 to 2010 and has numerous Australian titles to his credit. He's won the Sydney to Surf 4 times, the Sydney City to Surf 4 times, and still holds the course record of 40 minutes and 6 seconds. In 2006, he was the mayor of the Commonwealth Games Village in Melbourne. In 2010, the chef de mission at the Commonwealth Games in Delhi, and in 2014, the chief de mission of the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. The recommendation is that Steve Monaghetti be awarded life membership of Athletics. We have one more award, an important award, and that's the nomination for the Regional Service Award this year is to be presented to Ian Rickard. Ian, if you could make your way forward. Stand here. I know Ian's a bit embarrassed about this, but we don't mind that. Come over closer. You've got to get on the TV.
Oh, right. I have to.
Ian has been actively involved in setting timetables for Shield events in the Yellow Zone, and Ian is the current Zone Secretary and has held numerous positions within the zone, including the former Northwest region. Ian also provides analysis of the results from the Metro and Country rounds of Shield. Ian has been awarded the Regional Service Award for his service to Yellow Zone. So, congratulations. Congratulations, Ian. Very well done. Good. Thank you. We now come to item 11, the pennant presentations from the competitions that have been held. And I'm going to ask some of the board members to make these presentations, starting with Amber McDougall, if Amber could come forward. And we'll ask the people receiving to please move up the front to receive the presentations. We have APS United for the Men Division 3 40 plus in the winter. This is one emanating from the last winter season. Somebody from APS United? Can anybody pass it on? We'll move on then to the next award, Athletics Chilwell for women under 18, under 16, Men Division 2, under 18, under 16 and under 14. Congratulations. Athletics Athletics Essendon will be followed by Athletics Nunawading, so you can start lining up. Athletics Essendon for women under 20, under 18 and men under 20 and under 16. And Athletics Nunawading to be followed by Ballarat Harriers. Athletics Nunawading for the Women Division 1 and Men Division 1. Congratulations. And Ballarat Harriers for men under 18. We got somebody from Ballarat Harriers? Okay, we'll have to hang on to that one. And that ends Amber's little stint. And the next person is going to be Eric, presenting to Ballarat YCW. Is there somebody from Ballarat YCW? Yep, good. Ballarat YCW to be followed by Ballarat Region. But Ballarat YCW, women under 16 and men Division 2 and under 20. Congratulations. Ballarat Region, thank you, Rod. For women under 20, 40 plus, men Division 3, 4 and 6 and under 20. That's all relating to the winter competition from last year. Bellarine Track and Field, followed by Bendigo Harriers. Bellarine representative here? No, okay, sorry about that. Bendigo Harriers? No? Okay. Box Hill. Okay, I know we have representatives here from Box Hill. For the women 40 plus, the under 18 and under 16 women, and men 40, over 40 and under 18. Thanks, Chris. Casey Cadinia. We got somebody from, good. Casey Cadinia for women Division 2 and women under 14 and men Division 2 under 18 and under 14. Congratulations. Now I'll ask Heather Ridley to make the next presentation to be to Coburg Harriers, followed by Collingwood Harriers. So Coburg Harriers for women Division 2. Well done. And Collingwood Harriers, followed by Corio, Collingwood for men under 18. Good. I think we're up to Corio. Yep. For women under 14. Well done. Then Diamond Valley to be followed by Doncaster. So Diamond Valley for one of our very large clubs now. For women over 40, women under 18, under 16, under 14, and men over 40, under 20, under 16 and under 14. So quite a package there. And Doncaster, we got somebody from Doncaster. Surely we have somebody from Doncaster. Okay. Okay, well, thank you, Heather. Now Jamie, and we're going to make presentations to Eagle Hawk, followed by Eureka. So Eagle Hawk for women under 20, and Eureka for women Division 2 and women under 20. Then Frankston, followed by Geelong Guild. So for Frankston, women under 18, under 16 and men under 16, and also from the winter for the women's Division 3 and under 20. Well done. Geelong Guild for women's Division 2, over 40 and under 20, and for men over 40, and also a few from last winter for Women's Premiership Division 3 for under 18, under 16. Sorry, I'm reading ahead of the next. Thank you. Yet another stuff up. Okay, Geelong Region. Somebody representing Geelong Region? Richard? Oh, okay. Good. For Geelong Region, we have a stack of winter awards from last winter. For the Women's Premier Division 3, for women under 18, under 16, for Men Premier Division 3, 6, under 14. So very well done. Glenn Huntley. Glenn Huntley. I hate reading this one out because being from Box Hill, we've had a lifelong competition with Glenn Huntley, and here we have Glenn Huntley winning the Women's Division 1 and the Men's Division 1. Very well done. Okay, now we change over to Rod to make the next group of presentations, starting with Ivanhoe Harriers to be followed by Keilor St Bernards. So Ivanhoe Harriers for Men Division 2. Well done. And Keilor St Bernards, thank you, for women over 40, under 16 and under 14, and for Men Division 2, over 40 and under 18. Knox, followed by Malvern Harriers, so Knox for women under 20, and from last winter, women under 20 and Men Premier under 18. Malvern Harriers to be followed by Melbourne University. Malvern Harriers, Women Division 2 and Men Division 2. Good. And Melbourne University.
This is Melbourne.
Sorry. We're with Malvern, aren't we? Yeah, yeah. Good. No, glad you made it. Good. And for Melbourne University, thank you, Hamish.
It's not a game show, Hamish.
Women Division 1 and Men Division 1. Thank you, Rod. We change over to Rowan for Mentone and Mornington Peninsula. So starting with Mentone, men under 20 and women Division 5 from last winter. Thank you. Mornington Peninsula, we have women from last winter. These are Women Division 3 and Men Division 6. Well done. Oakley to be followed by Old Zaverians. Oakley, someone from Oakley? Yep. Good. Oakley, we have men over 40 and Old Zaverians. Old Zaverians, we have women under 20 and men under 20. Strong under 20. Richmond Harriers. Richmond Harriers, we have Women Division 2 and under 18 and Men Division 1. And our last presenter will be Russell Clowes, and the next club is Ringwood, to be followed by South Bendigo. So for Ringwood, we have women under 14, and we have men under 16, and from last winter we have Women Division 4 and Men Division 5. South Bendigo, do we have somebody here from South Bendigo? Good, great. South Bendigo, Women Division 2 and over 40 and under 18, under 16 and under 14, and Men Division 2. Well done. The Saints, we have St Kevin's followed by St Stephen's Harriers. So St Kevin's first. Men, I'm sure we have somebody here from St Kevin's. I'm not sure that we have somebody here. Okay, St Stephen's Harriers. It's a long way out. for St Stephen's Harriers, this comes from the last winter season, Women Division 2, Men Division 2 and Men Division 6. Then we have the Victorian Masters Club, followed by Wendouree. So Victorian Masters, good. Victorian Masters, we have a presentation for women over 40. And then we have Wendouree, if somebody can come forward for Wendouree. For Wendouree, we have women over 40, under 18 and under 14, and men over 40, under 16 and under 14. Then last one is Western Athletics, last but not least. And for them, we have the men under 14. Congratulations to all those clubs, and thank you to the board members presenting. We move on to item 12, which is general business, and we have two items of general business. The first one is outlined in your agenda there. Under item 12, we have one, questions from the Box Hill Athletic Club, and those questions are laid out for you there together with responses. But Chris O'Connor does want to say a few words. So, Chris, if you could step forward and make use of the microphone, or do you think you can? Being a lecturer, I think he can make himself heard from there.
So I just want to speak briefly to this question. I could talk for hours about this.
No, please don't.
But one of my problems or disappointments is that I feel like this is the first time I've had a forum to discuss any of the issues regarding field competition. Last year, quite a number of changes were brought in, and there was a fair amount of negative feedback towards the changes, and there were 8 rounds of field that changed at the last minute to 10. After that, within the club, I received some negative feedback from our members. It's also very difficult trying to sell to a new athlete, playing field competition, zone versus zone, knockout competition, specialist group, championship. It just makes the club a harder product to try to sell. So there was negative feedback from within the club. There appears to be negative feedback at the zone meeting, reading the minutes of the zone meeting. And yet this year there appears to be no change or very little change to the summer competition program. Which leads me to the question, who makes the decisions regarding the summer competition format, and on what grounds are these decisions made? Because it seems as if either feedback is being ignored or there's some information or feedback which I haven't heard or I don't know about.
Okay. The submission from Chris or from Box Hill is not in the form of a motion, so it doesn't really lend itself to discussion. But does anybody have anything pressing that they would like to say? If not, we'll take note of those comments, Chris, and I expect that when comments like this do come up, I expect they are reflective of a number. Sorry? Yes, have they not been circulated to you? I have them in front of me here. Ah, okay. Okay. Shall I read out the...
I'll take this. I'm happy to take
Okay.
it. I'm happy to take it. The questions came in the form of an email to me, which I responded to on the 7th of July at 6:26. There were 5 questions. The first question, and I'm happy to read them out if everyone wants to hear them. All right, the answer, who makes the decision regarding the summer competition format and on what grounds are these decisions made? As a CEO, I'm ultimately empowered to sign off on the calendar, which is prepared by the competitions team. The competitions team consult with the Shield and Championship committees for the summer program. The Shield committee consists of nominated reps from each zone, of which there are 2. I've attached the terms of reference for the committee, which are available on the website, which was amended last year after I recommended to the board that there was merit to put together an athletics advisory group. I provided Chris with the members of that group, and the AAG was predominantly to look at the future of the sport. There was a perception that they sat above the Shield Committee. That is not correct. They do not have final say. They're part of a strategic plan to get input from the various disciplines, events, coaches, officials and athletes, and their views on what the sport will look like in the future. This is being implemented in other states and at the national level, and you heard Phil mention that discussion a little bit earlier. Why have the results of the AV survey not been made to the public? Well, we've provided a summary of the survey results online and via Facebook. You would have seen that it was registered about 3.5 weeks ago. Why has there been no forum for discussion to the changes to summer competition? My response was, if you are referring to the previous summer and winter forums, these requirements were removed from the Constitution some years ago when it was decided at club level that the executive management and Athletics Victoria should have more control over the products and services, aka and the calendar for both summer and winter competitions.
If I could just briefly add to that. First of all, I'm sorry that you didn't have a copy of those responses with the agenda. But from a board point of view, the board is responsible for putting in place policies and guidelines and processes to make sure that things operate smoothly. They don't always operate smoothly, and we can always think of ways of doing better. But the board is very mindful that things are changing at a fairly rapid rate. And basically, most people are a little bit uncomfortable about change. And that brings us back to the requirements of communication. And as Glenn has acknowledged in his presentation, that's one area where there is a lot of focus, and we realise that we have to do a lot better. We do have processes by which these decisions are made, and those processes do involve input from the clubs and from individuals. And we try to balance all that up in the process. It's not easy to do, but there are opportunities there, and it's partly up to you to take advantage of those opportunities. Can we leave that item there, and we'll move on to the next one. So this is item 2, part of item 12. These are the motions that have been put forward coming from Williamstown Athletics. And before we deal with these motions, I do just want to make some points. When these motions first landed on the desk of Athletics Victoria, I was consulted as to whether these motions were appropriate to be put at an annual general meeting. The reason is, or the reasoning goes, that the annual general meeting is really the peak meeting about the governance of the organisation. The annual general meeting focuses on the reports, the annual report, the financial report. It focuses on the elections of board members and directors. So the annual general meeting is an occasion for looking at the governance of the organisation. We have been very careful to keep the governance of the organisation quite separate from the executive and the management of the organisation. The board members don't try to interfere too much with the management. We have our role, which is concerning governance. The executive has its role concerning management. The board provides policies and guidelines whereby it expects the management to operate. So that's basically how it works. So the question was, are these motions from Williamstown that are essentially about management questions, not governance questions. Is it appropriate for them to come up at an annual general meeting? Now, I made the ruling that they could, and I made that ruling on the basis that the annual general meeting is also a general meeting. It's not just an annual general meeting. Sure, the focus usually is entirely on governance, but our constitution does allow the opportunity for clubs to submit motions, as Williamstown has done. Now, since I made that ruling and the motions have appeared with due notice on the agenda papers, I've been contacted by several clubs saying this is not appropriate for the annual general meeting. But that's the ruling that I had made. Max, did you want to say? Max?
I'd like to move a motion of dissent in the chair's ruling on this, and that these items are taken off the agenda.
Okay, well, I'm quite comfortable with a motion of that nature, and is there I have to ask, is there a seconder for that? Would there be a seconder for that motion? Thank you, guys. Okay, there is a seconder for that motion. So, what's the motion again, Max? Can you just?
The motion is that I move a motion of dissent in the chair's ruling to include these items under 7 under item 12.2.
Okay. Well, under the standing orders under which we operate, with a motion of dissent from a ruling of the chair, I think the mover of the motion is entitled to speak, and nobody else is entitled to speak. After the mover of the motion finishes speaking, it goes straight to a vote. And so I'll ask Max if you wouldn't mind speaking to this.
Some of you will remember that prior to the summer general meeting of 2004, decisions regarding major changes to the summer competition program always dealt with at the summer general meeting and required a 75% majority to be incorporated in the next summer program. This long-established part. This long-established part of the then AV Constitution created serious problems for the development of the competition program and stifled any innovation at the time. At that meeting in 2004, in excess of 75% of the meeting delegates supported a change to the Constitution, which meant that all the competition matters will be dealt with by the Competition Committee and no longer at the general meeting. Now, my understanding of constitutions is that the AGM and other general meetings are intended to deal with governance issues, as you so mentioned, and that operational matters are generally dealt with by the operational arm of the organisation. Sometimes these are directed by such things as bylaws, but increasingly in sport have become the responsibility of the administration, directed by strategies and policies. So the way forward for clubs or individuals who are unhappy with the way in which these matters are being dealt with by the administration is to appeal to the board. In the end, we have given the board the power to make governance decisions, set the strategies and develop policies on our behalf, and they have, or at least should have, delegated operational decisions to the administration. If the board does not meet our expectations or deliver those things that we think are important for the future of our sport, then we can stand for a board position and influence it in that way, or we can ensure that the people we believe will support our point of view are elected, and we've had a choice tonight. So, Mr. Chairman, that's our position. I don't want us to go back to those days when we used to spend many hours
wrestling over trivial issues to do with changes to the competition program, which rightfully should be done by a competition part of the administration of the organisation, be it the AV staff or a competition committee. And I think there are in place processes which allow us to have our say, and if that's not happening, if the communication is not happening sufficiently well, then we should be doing something about it. I would hate to see us go back to general meetings where we spend hour upon hour talking about not trivial matters, matters that are to do with operational administration issues as opposed to governance matters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is that the meeting support dissent from my ruling, and that is that the consequence of that would be that the motions put forward by Williamstown would simply be set aside and we would move to item 13 on the agenda. And that's, as I say, that's something that I'm quite comfortable with, and the meeting is quite entitled to make that decision. So without any further ado, I think I've explained why I originally made the decision, but as I say, I have been prevailed upon by several people suggesting that it wasn't the right way to go. Okay, so I will put the motion. Those in favour of the motion put by Max, those please show your hands. I think we might have to count it. Just let me have a quick look. Yep. Let's just have a quick look at those who are against the motion. Okay, it's going to be tight. Okay, George, if you would like to perhaps come and help me here in counting the votes. I'll have to ask for the shows of hands again. First of all, just show of hands. Okay, hold your hands well up. Those in favour of the motion, that is to move straight to item 13, and we don't consider these at the end of the meeting. Okay, and those against the motion.
There being 46 against the motion and 40 for the motion, I put it in the negative.
Okay, thank you. So that being the case, we will move to the series of motions proposed by Williamstown. I will, however, make another ruling, and because these motions are quite specific in their management detail, I'm going to rule that they can be indicative only. So they are indicative to the organisation to obviously take note of these motions if they are passed, and if they are not passed, of course, that's another matter. But if the motions are passed, that they would be indicative only. Okay, so we'll move to, I'll ask David to move the first motion.
Okay.
Uh,
Can you hear me with the
without,
microphone?
without
or without?
speaking to it, David, just move it first. It's
Oh,
just,
right, okay,
yeah.
so we've got to get a mover then a seconder
Yeah,
before
that's
it
right.
comes into play.
So just move it first.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm moving the first... Oops, sorry. Not used to this. I'm moving that first motion, which is the Athletics Victoria provide a minimum of 12 rounds of inter-club summer competition, currently known as AV Shield competition, to be available for athletes of all standards.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Okay. Okay, now, David, you can speak to the motion.
Okay.
Or do you just want it to go to the vote?
Oh, no, I just want to make a couple of points now. Unfortunately, sorry, I've got too many things on my hand. Unfortunately, it's getting a little bit late, and
Keep going.
I know it's 9:30 or thereabouts, and the father said never get on last on the agenda and never be in a meeting that's longer than 2 hours. So I've sort of cracked the double there, I think. Now, all I really wanted to say here with this one, I'll just make a couple of points rather than sort of go into too much background. We feel we really need that at least 12 rounds of competition. It's really to give value to what I regard as about 95% of the athletes, the normal summer athletes. Okay, and I think what's tended to happen a little bit in the last couple of years or so is that there tends to be a bit more of too much focus on that 5% who want to climb up the ladder, be the champions and so forth. So I really want to sort of stress that it's about giving value to that 95% of club people who turn up on the weekend, compete, support clubs and compete in the sport that they enjoy. I know what I want to make sure of is that people don't think that I'm arguing necessarily for the competition as it currently stands, because as we've heard earlier, we need to evolve and we need to get better. And I think that AV Shield competition can get better. We're supposed to have a graded competition in place, but I don't think that really works as well as it should. But the main thing here is that it's about giving value and it's about having a reasonable number of events. If you go to all other sports, you might be looking at 16, 18, I think the Little Ass have about 18 rounds of competition. The BAL have somewhere near 24. We're offering basically 12 rounds, so we've got to give good value to people.
Okay. Is there a speaker against the motion? Well, if I can answer that, that's why I said that any passage of these motions could only be indicative, because it's not a simple process to set up the summer program.
To answer your question, at the moment, the number of officials and the resources probably couldn't sustain the competition format in its current form. If we were to take the indication that the majority wanted 12 rounds of Shield, we would probably have to remove some other aspects of the competition pathway. And just to clarify a point, it isn't 95% that participate in Shield, and it's not 5% that want to participate at different levels. Knockout, contrary to comments, provided nearly 900 event entries with over 650 individual athletes, all three of the knockout rounds. And the reason why I dropped it from 12 to 10 is for the simple reason that the majority of the membership did not support 12 rounds of Shield. What they supported was a choice of the 12 rounds to participate in at least 10 or 7, because they had school holidays, they had church, they had work commitments, they had exams. And so what we've tried to do is shuffle the Shield competition around so that we avoided as many clashes as
Peter, did you still want to say something?